Uh, did some work on the seams between ring 1 and ring 2. Kind of wondering how far I need to take it. I'd like it to be perfect, as everybody would, but that's not quite realistic, I don't think. At least not for my skill level. I seem to have a problem with the first ring. Kind of looks like it bowed out a bit at the top, and it actually might have done the same thing on all of the rings, where as it gets to the top it seems to be going outwards. Not sure why. Probably again I didn't spend enough time setting up the printer I printed these on. It did mean I had a lot of sanding to do to get the seams even presentable. So here it is. I had done the first layer and had it all sanded smooth and primed, thinking I was just going to paint it, but that's obviously you can't do that. You have to glue the rings together. So gluing the rings together, you have a seam, you have to sand down that primer, and I think I mentioned in my last video it was kind of a mistake to put that last, what I thought was the last coat of primer on the first ring, because obviously you have to fix your seams and then prime it again. So I don't have as many coats of primer on this second ring. You can see some areas where I've sanded a little bit down past the primer that's there, but not as many places on this first ring. There are some here, obviously, but this first ring has more coats of primer. But this whole thing has been gone over once with a 220 grit sanding sponge. So some of the seams are pretty damn good. This one here is pretty good. There's a slight bump out just on the lip here, but that's not at the seam, that's lower. That's just a print artifact I didn't notice before I primed it, so that will just be easy to sand down. And again, I don't know how good this camera is going to pick it up, but obviously there's a low spot here. This has got a seam down the middle for the ring, these two parts glued together. And then up here there's also a seam where this ring and this ring are glued together. So pretty good up there, but it looks like I just need to put a little bit of filler down there and I can pretty much cover up the little bit that's showing from that seam. Again, it's really an issue of getting it in the light. Okay, there's kind of a visible bit there. If you can see that, it's a little bit darker, which is a combination of the shadows and going over it with the sanding sponge. Gets the high spots and the low spots will be a little bit rougher because the sandpaper hasn't reached that surface. A little bit there, but not too concerned. This side is actually pretty good. I've got a little funkiness going on with this panel. It gets glued. This is the split between the two layers. So it gets glued here, and I've got some glue residue that's sticking to the top of this panel. I used a 2-part plastic epoxy, and so it's a little bit, the seam's a little bit rough on this side of this panel gap. On this panel, I haven't gone through the panels yet to do any sanding on them. This one's fairly good, but again, it's like right here, there's a bump about like this in this first ring, and if I can't really sand it down because then it's going to mess up the panel line here. So I'm just kind of wondering how much is it going to show, because all I can pretty much do is add some filler, a little bit of filler above it to try and bevel that so it doesn't raise so much, more of a gradual raise, but I don't know how visible that's even going to be when it's all painted. So I'm going to be working on the seams, but I'm not sure how perfect I'm going to try and get them. This one, again, this one I can feel it needs a little bit of filler up on this top area, again, to kind of bevel it down, but it's pretty darn good. This one's pretty good. This over here is another one where I can feel there's down here, which is not even on the seam. There's an area that could use some filler. It's a bit low. And then up where it does join, it's a bit higher here, and this is an area where I sanded a lot of this because it was sticking out. I sanded a lot of that down, and still it's higher here than it is on this ring. But again, I'm not sure how much of that. Actually, the seam, what am I talking about? The seam is here. So the seam on this one is okay. I just feel a high spot from about the bottom of this panel line down. I don't think that's going to be visible. I can barely feel it. And this one's got some discoloration there. It feels pretty good though, but probably put some filler on there. And then the back, of course, is where it has the best seams, where you don't really care. So that's pretty much where I am with that. I didn't, you can see the darker color. I didn't sand in any of the panel inserts on this second ring yet. I just did all the raised areas just now, just got finished. I did trial fit the vent piece in here, and it fits good. So I'm trying to debate now as far as this piece here that has utility arms in it. Does need some work to get the utility arm openings a little better, but I really want to get this done, and I'm starting to have doubts that I'm going to be able to get the body together and painted by the end of the summer, because I just keep finding more areas that it's like, oh, I want to work on this area more, and things aren't going together quite well, and yeah, I'm neglecting yard work because I'll spend 4 hours outside in a shady spot in the nice weather, trying to do as much sanding as I can on the pieces. And I'm working on this in the legs and the feet and the battery boxes and the horseshoes all at the same time, each in a different state of preparation. So anyway, that's where I am with this. I'm thinking of putting the third ring. I'm going to leave this here when I'm done making this video. I think I'm going to get the pieces for the third ring. Put them, they all have, like I said before, there's little bumps here, and then there's notches in the pieces that go on top of them that helps align them, and then there's 4 places that threaded rods go all the way through to help hold them in alignment. And so I'm thinking of putting the third ring on, I've printed the top ring, it's called, that goes on top of the body, putting that on, and then just doing a dry fit of clamping the third ring to the top ring piece so it'll maintain its round shape, and then seeing how things fit on the alignment pegs and with the threaded rods to see where I'm at. And I might go ahead and, if it looks good, I might actually glue the third layer on. Something that you need to consider when you're doing this, I take this outside and I tend to hold it by the bottom. I hold it, well, from the other side, but I hold it down there and lift it up, and I'm carrying it through doors, through the house, through the garage, depending if I'm, doing paint and I don't want the smell in the house, or filler material that has a smell to it or whatever. And then I take it outside to sand, and it's getting pretty heavy. Just these two rings, it's pretty heavy. And so I'm out there with my arm in here, and these parts pressing on my upper arm, making indentations in my arm as I am turning it around and sanding it. And it does take a little bit of strength to hold this up for the amount of time it takes to do the sanding. And with the third ring, that's going to be obviously even heavier. So it is something to consider when you're doing this, that be prepared to do some arm exercises there, because you will get a workout if you're doing the same way I am. I guess the other way to do it is bring maybe some towels outside and then put this on its side, and then you can do some pieces and then turn it and keep going, and then turn it and keep going. That's another way you could do it, where you didn't have to hold it. But I find myself out there holding it, and by the time I've gone all the way around this thing with 220 grit, it's like my arm is done. It's like I need a break. So I'm quite happy with that. Actually, it's exercise. I'm getting more exercise doing this than I've had, obviously, since the pandemic, where a lot of it was during the winter and bad weather and just sitting at home not doing much. I am running in the house to the garage, get a piece, run outside, or not run, but go outside to the backyard and find some shade and do some sanding, come back in, get another piece, do it one at a time, trying to get my exercise. So R2D2, the newest exercise program, who would have thought? Now on to the bad news. This I consider okay news. A lot of these seams I'm really happy with already. I'm not sure. Looking at other people's droids online after they're painted, the main thing that kind of sticks out are panel lines. If your cutouts for the panel lines aren't lined up, or have some filler in them or something that didn't get noticed and sanded out, those seem to be pretty evident. And again, I'm not putting anybody's droid down or anything. I'm just saying, when you get about this close, you see pictures, close-up pictures of somebody's droid, these panel lines tend to stand out if they have imperfections in them. That's all I'm saying. I don't tend to notice the seams between the parts. So either everybody's getting it really perfectly flush, or after you paint it, as long as you don't have that panel line showing, if you've got a little bump, then I'm guessing it doesn't really show all that much, because I haven't really noticed it. I've been on the Michael Baddeley Facebook page more often now that I'm starting to do some painting, getting ready for painting. I haven't been spending hardly any time on it, because I've just been doing sanding and priming, and I know how to do that, but I'm not the best at final paint jobs. So, in fact, I've never done any final spray paint jobs on a 3D printed part. I did plastic models when I was a kid, and I always got runs. So I'm a little bit better now than I was then, but not much, and I'll show you that in just a second here. So yeah, I'm thinking the panel lines are where my primary focus is, and then just making sure that there's nothing glaringly obvious with the joins between the different rings. And if there's a slight bump out that I can feel with my fingers, it's not going to be that noticeable when painted, because it's like a gradual, it comes out a bit and goes in a bit, as opposed to a horizontal or vertical line, which is noticeable because the human eye picks that stuff up. It's really easy to see a horizontal and a vertical line, but when something's not quite flush, it's not that easy to see. So I'm wishing this was better quality, but because I'm a perfectionist, I am to that point where it's I'm gonna be happy with it. I'm gonna be like, yes, it looks great. If you get this close, you're gonna see some imperfections, some waves, maybe some areas where I just couldn't get a seam right just because of how far off it was and what would be needed to fix it. But I'll be okay with that because just looking at it from a foot away or whatever, it'll probably be absolutely fine. So, as I said, I've never been that good at painting. Primer is kind of easy because who cares, even if you put it on so thick it runs, it's primer and you're going to be sanding most of it off till it's smooth. Final coat of paint. Like I said, when I was a kid, teenager, whatever, I did a lot of plastic models. And I experienced runs a lot of the time because I just put paint on too thick. I know that, and I try not to, but I still end up doing it even to this day. And I've never sanded a finished paint job either. I know a lot of people, they do wet sanding on the final paint, or even dry sanding with really fine sandpaper, and I've just never done that, and I might have to do that with this. I'm really not sure. I bought some white, some Rust-Oleum satin white. I did some research. There are multiple kinds of Rust-Oleum satin white. There's heirloom white I found at my local Ace Hardware. There's blossom white that I've seen online. And then there's just Rust-Oleum satin white, what is it called? Protective enamel, stops rust, whatever brand. And that's the one I bought and I'm going to choose to use. The heirloom white looked a bit off-whitish to me. Blossom white, and both of those are the, what is it called? 2K? Or is it 2X? It's like paint and primer in one double coat of a normal can or something like that. The blossom white looks a bit red tint, just a tiny bit. So, looking online on the Facebook group, I've decided to use just the plain Rust-Oleum stops rust satin white. So that's what I'm going to use for the white. Anyway, for the blue, I have the Duplicolor, what is it called? Sonic Pearl Blue Ford color. And this is my first ever final coat of paint on one of my pieces. And look what I did. I put it on so thick that it ran. And down here, so thick that it didn't run, but it kind of did that bubble up thing it does when paint goes on too thick. Now, I will say, the Duplicolor cans, I don't know how anybody gets a good paint job out of those. The nozzle on them can be rotated. And so when I first started spraying it, the nozzle was rotated horizontal. So the spray from it came out in like a horizontal fan. And so I had this up, and I was trying to paint it like this with a horizontal fan, and it was just like, you could just see the streak. So then I twisted it to vertical, and I was going like this, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's much better. And then by the time I had the blobs from going horizontal, and then I did this, and this is the first thing I tried printing with that Duplicolor paint. I ended up going way too thick here, and a bit too thick there. And I figured, well, shoot, I'll just sand all this off and do it again, because the other leg looks okay. The other leg came out fine. Now, you might be asking, why are you painting this blue? The legs are supposed to be white. I have seen a few people who have done this, and the reason is, and I should have got the pieces out here to show, but once you have the booster cover in place, and then you have the, I forget the name of it, I gotta relearn my R2 technical terms, the piece that goes in the booster cover that plugs into these two holes extends all the way down to the ankle. it covers all this up, but it's a thick piece here and then it gets thinner here. So you can actually see this side of the center section of the leg when you put that piece in. So if the whole leg is white, you've got this, your booster cover blue, or whatever color you use, assuming that your leg is white, your booster cover is blue, and then the piece that goes into here is silver, and then you can see this bright, you can see this white through when you're looking at it. So if you paint this part blue, or you could even do black, once I finished with this and I put the pieces on to look at it and see if I really need to sand this out and redo it, you could even do this in black, because you can't really even tell that this is blue when you've got those pieces on, because you can just see between all the parts through to this surface, but it's always pretty much going to be in shadow because the pieces are kind of blocking the light. So just having a dark color on this makes it not a glaring white, something that's noticeable. If you look at some droids, and again, that's your choice, but if you look at some droids where the whole leg is painted white and you look at this area where the piece that goes here is, you can see white underneath it, and it kind of looks like, but just to me, it didn't look like it should be that way. It looked like you shouldn't be able to see anything in that recess. So that's why I chose to do blue. And again, when I put the pieces on to see, I'm not going to redo this paint. I could, and it's going to bug the heck out of me forever because I'm going to know it's there. But because I am not good at spraying this blue paint, I don't really want to waste the blue paint or go through the hassle of taking it off and trying to do it again and end up just making it the same or worse or whatever. So when everything's in here, you don't see that area. This area you might see a tiny bit, but it's like I said, it's blue. Yes, it's bubbled up a little bit. It's not perfect right there, but it's not going to be like a highlight in bright light. It's just something that if somebody, again, gets like this close and happens to be looking between the pieces, they might notice. And again, who's going to be doing that other than, me or another droid builder? And they're going to be like, oh yeah, whatever. Maybe they'll see it and go, oh yeah, you should have sanded that down. Whatever. I think I'm okay with it because you're not going to see the drip. That's not even going to be visible. It's just basically this little bit here at the bottom that you might see. So no big deal. What is a big deal? I occasionally have some stupid ideas, and I had one on this piece. When I went to paint this piece, an earlier video, I showed the thing I made where I could hang parts to print on my bird feeder, an old bird feeder, with aluminum bar screwed across the top. When I had this masked off to paint, I put it on the aluminum bar. This thing is heavy. I knew this thing was heavy. I don't know why I thought that aluminum bar would hold it, but it did. I put it on, and I had paper masking the areas I didn't want blue, so the hole was covered up. So I only put it in the back, just maybe a little bit out from this opening because the paper wasn't tight against it. So just like that, and the aluminum was bending down, and I thought, oh well, it's holding it, that should be okay. I'll put the other leg on the other side and see what happens. Yeah, as I was putting the other leg on the other side, of course I was moving the whole bird feeder assembly, and this fell off. And that's about, from here to the ground, that's like a 4-foot drop. Totally stupid, totally my fault, totally preventable. Here's what happened. That hole in the upper right, that was a rock. The ground beneath it is basically some stepping stones and some small pebbles. Yeah, that's how much damage that did falling on that rock. And if you go online and look at guides that tell you how thick to print the leg parts and how many perimeters, that's what I did. So this has got a lot of layers. This is not a thin part. The other part I can't really point out because I'm obviously holding the leg in the camera. If you look above it, there's a little separation between layers. You can see there's between the two holes, the two rectangular holes, there's kind of a dirt smudge. That's from some moss that was on one of the stepping stones. And right above it, near its right hand side, you can see there's a little bit of layer separation, and also it extends to the area that's crunched by the rock. Looking down below, there might be another area of separation. There might be another area of separation right at the bottom of the area from where the rock was embedded that goes off to the left. So yes, I'm extremely upset at myself. I tend to do stupid things like that. I thought, well, that's okay. That's the only damage it did. That gets glued into the ankle. It's going to be in there. It's going to be secured, held together. And the layers that are a little bit split are facing down, so it's not like they have any pressure that's going to be trying to pull them apart. And then I went over it and I noticed that I screwed up a corner as well. I just got done painting it. Excuse me, with the light and the focus and the handheld camera. I know, terrible. Yeah, the left-hand corner here. I took the tip off of that corner. I tried to fix it. I've used some glazing putty on it. I know I really should have used the two-part Bondo because it's so much tougher than the glazing putty. But it's such a small area, I don't think even it would have stuck well, so I really should have sanded that corner down. Kind of like at a 45-degree angle, the whole tip, and then just recreated the entire tip with the two-part Bondo. But I was so crushed that I just tried it with the glazing putty, and you can probably see, I think I'm showing that it's not perfect, but it's better than it was, and it's in the back, and quite honestly, I'm gonna just leave it that way. Being the sharp corner, I'm not sure how much better I'm going to be able to make that, and I'm also not sure that that's even going to be really noticeable. I mean, it will be not a completely sharp corner, but again, I'm to the point where I'm not panicking that I'm not going to get enough done this summer, but I'm just to that point where it's like, how much time am I going to spend on this? It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect. It's an astromech droid. I mean, it's okay if it's got a ding here and there, and it's gonna have dings here and there and seams that aren't perfect and raised areas, etc. So I'm thinking that I'm okay. How I've got it. And again, I just not too long ago went outside and just sprayed more primer on this area. This was all ready for paint. I sanded it down with 400 grit all over it and took it outside, did the blue part, and then I was going to mask off the blue part and do the white. And that's when this happened. So now Now I've got to redo 400 grit and make sure that's all. Well, let the paint dry, obviously. Um, Sand it with 400 grit. Hope that it all manages to blend in nicely and I don't see any more work. If I do, maybe I'll put some more of the glazing putty and try to get the corner a little bit better and then some more paint. But you know, as the days go on, it's just you realize how much time all this takes, and I like to let the primer dry at least overnight before I start sanding it, which is probably overkill, but I just like to have that assurance that the paint is dry. The same thing when I put the filler, I like to let it dry overnight, even though I think it on the tube it says a couple hours or whatever. I like to make sure everything is nice and dry before I hit it with any sandpaper or anything. So the rest of this leg and the entirety of the other one is fairly ready, although now I can feel there's overspray over quite a bit of that from spraying the primer in this corner. So the whole thing will have to be gone over just lightly with 400 grit. It's not that bad. But yeah, just one of those things that I tend to do every now and then. I just have a really stupid idea, and I know it's a bad idea, and I do it anyway, and stuff like that happens. So just be careful when you get to the stage like this where you think you're ready for paint. Just be really careful because it just takes one whoops and now you're not ready for paint anymore and you have to go back to filler and sanding, and it just is going to take even more time. So that's the lesson for the day. Be careful. Think. Instead of measure twice, cut once. Think really hard about what you're doing. And if you think there's any chance that you might drop something, either the way you're placing it to be sanded or it's a windy day and you're going to put it outside, like these legs, I get really nervous. I tend to put them outside, standing up like this on a piece of particle board when I paint them, and depending on the wind, if it's too windy, I won't do it because they might fall over. They do weigh a lot. It would take a pretty good gust, but you know, it's just, again, think twice at least before you do anything when you get to the stages where your parts are in a really nice shape. So I think that's about it. I could show you the foot shell. I've got some more the left and right foot shells. I have more filler on them, so I have given them their first coat of primer, sanded that back. I have now got the first coat of filler, so I need to sand that back, put another coat of primer, and then check to see where else I need to do some more filler. The battery boxes are being kind of a pain in the neck. I've done a couple. I did a coat of primer. I did some filler. I did another coat of primer. I've now got more filler dried on it, so they both need to be... No, I didn't. I sanded those down. Sorry. Those have been primed, filled, primed, sanded, primed again, and now I need to sand, and I'm pretty sure there's a couple areas that need to have some more filler, but they're getting close. The foot shells, I can't really tell if they're getting close or not. I'm just to the stage where I need to sand off the filler I've got all over them and prime them one more time to see how close I am on those. The horseshoes right now are still just primed. I haven't gone over them yet. No, wait. Yeah, see, I'm losing track. The horseshoes, I think I primed, filled, and then primed again. So they need to be sanded and then check to see if they're ready for paint or need some more filler. And the boosters have just one coat of primer. I put filler all over those before I primed, and then I primed one coat. And they're such a pain in the neck to sand because of all the different shaped areas in them that I haven't sanded those yet. And I'll tell you what, that I am really afraid, if I can't paint a perfectly flat, well, near perfectly flat, I got a seam here that again I didn't care about because you're not going to see the seam in here, but if I can't get a flat piece of something colored with blue, and I've got those boosters that have, you know, all kind of funky angles, how am I going to get that blue on the boosters without screwing it up? I honestly don't know. I really don't know. I'm terrified of that. So that's about where I am with all the stuff. I think my last video might have been the one where I showed all the parts out here and where they were, but these are the two important ones that I wanted to get shown today. That I'm working on the seams here, and I'm thinking of putting the third ring on, even though, as I said, this is going to be really heavy, and then I have to work on the opening for the utility arms and having it all glued together. There is the risk of dropping this. So again, I don't know what else to do. I guess instead of gluing the third ring on, it might, now that I'm thinking about it twice, it might be smarter to put the third ring on, all just like the first two. Just put the third ring on, don't glue it in place, just glue the pieces to each other and the top ring, so I know they're glued together and round and fit on these, and then I can take that third ring off and do the preliminary sanding and filler and, well, priming, sanding, whatever, and then get them to the point where they're ready to be glued to here, because they primarily just need to be glued and then all the seams worked on. So, okay, now I'm back to the point where I'm just rambling on. So that's about it for this week. Just wanted to get something out. I have been spending hours and hours, but it seems like I'm not getting all that much done. Was excited to actually print final color, screwed up the first final color, and then smashed a leg piece, but luckily not bad enough that I have to reprint it, because that would have just totally sucked. Actually, now that I feel right here, the area apart from above where I jammed it, I can feel that it's raised. I haven't tried to put this back in the ankle. I can feel right now I'm going to have a problem. I'm going to have to sand that down. So yeah, if I have to reprint this whole leg, I am just going to lose my cool, because that is a lot of time. And yeah, whatever. That's it. I'm going to stop the video here before I find any more defects anywhere. Just try and stop on a happy note that, yes, I've got the two parts of the body together. I'm going to start working on the third. Still hoping to get the entire body glued together and sanded and primed and filled and painted white. And really hoping to get the legs painted white also this summer. And if I could get the entirety of the legs together, that would be the best thing. If I could get the legs white, the ankle bracelet part that slides on, that's silver, and then glue on the ankles and have the ankles painted white, then at least the main assembly of the leg would be done. And since I'm working on the horseshoes, working on the booster, that's booster cover, that would make me extremely happy. But the body is kind of the primary focus, so that's where we're at.